Hello, how's everyone doing? It's been maybe about 2 weeks since I uploaded my last episode. I definitely want to take out the time to make sure that when I do these, I actually am in the mood to talk about something. I don't want to get into the spirit of like making these episodes or uploading these episodes half-heartedly without like the correct motivation because I do feel like it's always important to have some level of authenticity when doing your work, and I never want to post something that my heart isn't into, and I don't want you to listen to something that is half quality or less. So apologize for the wait. There's been a lot that has occurred, I believe, over these past couple weeks. One of those things is the Blizzard debacle. My heart goes out to all the victims of that situation and circumstance. It's unfortunate that, being that World of Warcraft was the first episode in which I talked about the game and its deflating conditions, the news about all of the outrageous and ridiculous things that, you know, the many victims of that circumstance had to go through, was a pretty gut wrenching read. Um, I do hope that justice is served. I do hope that the correct people are met with the consequences that they deserve, and wrongs are righted overall. It's just unfortunate and sad that you know that level of poor leadership, poor management, lack of transparency and accountability is just so common in this world that we live in. It really it really begs to ask the question: is it really just a people thing, or you know, do the structures that we adhere to in the infrastructures in which we abide by, do these need to be restructured and reformatted for a new future to come, or do we have something cultural that's going to take time in order to implement the proper resolutions so that there never has to be victims that have to go through such corporate upheaval, because I've stated again, I grew up on Blizzard games on my PC, just like the many people who have been paying attention to the news or who have just recently transferred to playing Final Fantasy XIV online. And it's just unfortunate. I know there was, I believe, a YouTuber or a streamer who compared Blizzard in its heyday to almost being like the Pixar of gaming, and in many ways I 100% agree with that analogy or that comparison. They were pretty up there. The Blizzard name was a household name, and it's just so sad that the conditions of their games and the quality of their game has completely deflated or diminished over time, while also news coming out that maybe um, these criminal acts, you could say, might have had a gigantic impact on the quality of video game that we were being provided all these years, and the decisions that were being made. And it doesn't help that to some degree Blizzard has also sort of partaken in being publicly kind of appeasing to being inclusive and being open and being understanding about different marginalized groups and such like that, and celebrating diversity. But then you hear that situations that are happening right now within their corporate walls have been going on for so long, and nothing's really been done about it until an entire state had to sue the entire company. That's just crazy. It's absurd, it's ridiculous, but that is the world we live in. And sometimes I ask myself that, like, in the near future, there's going to have to be a lot of work to be done, because there were still people, even when reading the comments of, the case that was being presented all over the internet. There's still a loud vocal, but I'd say minority few who have been like, why does this matter? Blah, 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 such and such and such. And those people are always going to exist, but that is kind of the problem we're going to face now. Different vulnerable groups are always going to have to deal with people who kind of disparage their concerns or their situations that leave them feeling vulnerable, harassed, scared. And what we need to do is just galvanize and create a bulwark around those people and make sure that no matter what, they're protected and their words do not become hollowed out under the ocean current, you know? That's the best thing we can do. And yeah, but I do really hope that in the near future that Blizzard can pick itself back up, because again, World of Warcraft, it's still a game where if I was to hop on my character right now and jump on my mount and ride around Elwyn Forest or Stormwind or any of the local zones, you know, my heart would still stir at the fact that this is some place that I grew up in. This is a place that I immersed myself in to escape a lot of the stressful things I had to deal with in life and to become someone bigger than I already was, because in many ways, again, I've always been an immersive gamer. I've always liked to immerse myself in the games I'm in because I liked being thrown into a new world with new characters and new interactions and be given powers, and I can be larger than life. And I'm sure that's how a lot of people growing up playing video games, they grew up with video games the same way most kids grow up playing with action figures, except we are playing the action figures through an interactive medium. And that's why I've been gaming for, I'd almost kind of say maybe over 20 years, 25 years. I know I said I gamed since I was 5. My first game was like Super Mario on the SNES, the Super Nintendo. But anyway, that's kind of what I think this segment today will be about. Just how oftentimes, you know, what are the reasons that we get so engaged in the games we play? What really draws us in? And I can only really, talk about myself. And that's what I'm going to pretty much do. But I'll, hop around different ideas surrounding what really draws us into these worlds and stuff like that. Because some of us are competitors. Some of us are immersives. Some of us are just looking for a way to leisurely blow off steam. Some of us are socializers. And, I'm sure there's like many more categories one could think of. But yeah, all these things are relevant to all the things that drag us into these landscapes that are, again, larger than life. I know when talking about, feeling like when I think about games that have had a large impact on me, I think oftentimes of like BioWare back in the old days. When I think about Knights of the Old Republic, I think I discussed at length, maybe last episode or 2 episodes ago, about being what I refer to as a meathead gamer, which is just someone who plays games as if they're all action games and they don't require thought. And so I used to play RPG games like Kingdom Hearts and Knights of the Old Republic, and oftentimes Final Fantasy, with the idea that I just have to hit the attack button over and over and over again and I'll beat it. And that worked for Kingdom Hearts, but when playing like games like Knights of the Old Republic, I wasn't so lucky. And so I don't even know how I beat Knights of the Old Republic 2 like that, but I mean, I generally picked like the basic build. Like, I think when you start the game, it gives you like 3 types of Jedi you could choose to make. There's like a Force exclusive Jedi, which is like an advanced character. They actually tell you in the menu, don't pick this unless you have experience. And then there's like a lightsaber only warrior fighter character, and then there's a balanced character. And I think the balanced character is the easiest. I could be wrong, but I think that's the character I played. And so there will be many times when I'll just play the game and get stopped at different locations because my character wasn't strong enough or I wasn't equipping the right weapons. And so I wouldn't know what to do. I would just roam around and just kill more and more monsters. And through my boredom of being stuck and lost, I would just grind my butt off and then confront the boss that I was stuck at, and like I'm like 15 levels higher and I win, and I'm just like, oh, I must have used a very clever strategy there, but it was just like, no, I just grinded. But yeah, when talking about games that have had a stark impact on me. I think of Knights of the Republic because from a story point of view, it had a lot of substance and depth, and I'd probably say Knights of the Republic 2 is one of my most favorite consumed Star Wars material in history, even to this day, because so much of that game has a sort of stark philosophy on the galaxy and the world of Star Wars that many mediums don't often touch. There's questions about what the Force is and what it means, and you're basically one of your companions who's named Kreia is sort of your mentor and guide in the game. And there are many instances in the game where she kind of has the power to use the Force to see intuitively different events or to see into people's mind, Jedi stuff you could think of. And, there are many times where you're going to be confronted with a choice and decision you have to make. And there's this one instance where you go to a certain Star Wars planet that's known in the Star Wars lore known as Nar Shaddaa. Nar Shaddaa is like the criminal planet. Like, you think of any Hutt underworld, bounty hunter, crime-fested, scavenger, pirate stronghold, and Nar Shaddaa is it. It is where all the most cutthroat scum of hive and villainy you can think of all hide out. And in the game you go here, and there's a beggar who approaches you and says, please spare change. Can you please help me? I'm struggling. And you can, when I was young, I liked being the hero. I still do, but I remember, like, even to this day when I play games, it's very difficult for me to be a jerk because, again, I'm kind of an immersive. I feel myself through my character and even movies I watch and stuff like that. So I'm just like, yeah, I'll help you out. Like, here, I gave him how many credits I had or whatnot, and he walked away. And then I remember the character of Kreia always acts as this character who always questions every decision you make because she's trying to train you, but there's some level of mystery to her character where when you do something right, she always finds an angle to make you feel like you did something wrong. And that's why I thought she was great. So once you grant charity to this beggar, she turns around and she's like, what do you think you're doing? And you're just like, what do you mean what I'm doing? I'm being the hero. And she's just like, by offering charity to this person, you've kind of taken away their ability to sort of survive and fend for themselves. And so instead of offering them charity, you've offered them weakness, because in helping them now, they're not going to be ready to face what dangers are ahead, or they're going to go around and brag about the charity you offered them that they didn't work for. And so I thought the entire time, like, I did something wrong. I was like, did I do something wrong? Like, why is she on my case like this? And it wasn't until much later when after I beat the game and years later that I found out that she rips you a new one regardless of whether you help this beggar or you don't. Because if you don't help this beggar, what she does is she tells you, well, that was very cruel of you. And you're like, well, what do you mean? And, she talks about, like, how, not giving that person the money or whatever they're asking for is going to make their life harder, and in many ways how, like, I guess, like, charity and doing something nice also helps the universe go round and round. And so that's when I found out much later that she's a character who's built to always philosophically question whatever good decision you think you're making at the time. And that really blew me away. That's why I think when I think about how I view the world and perceive things, I think of Kreia as being one of my most favorite video game characters of all time. Not just because of the secret she's keeping and how significant she is to the overall plot when she finally reveals who she is. She's a character that I don't think you often see a whole lot of in current gaming nowadays, or maybe I haven't been playing enough games in general. It's always really fun to be able to see how a character can make you question your sense of self and the way you go and where you go, and how you could always consider how, like, even your greatest or most good action can have very grave consequences for someone. Because that beggar that I just spoke of, if you do end up actually giving him the money he needs in order to to feed himself or to give him what he requires in order to sustain himself, he ends up actually, I think, getting robbed or killed, for what he has by someone else, who you didn't mean for that to happen to him, but that's what happened in the circumstances and conditions he lives in. He lives in Narshada, where it's a violent haven for criminals, and refugees live here and they're just trying to get by, and he ends up getting killed and jumped for it, and it's really wild. And so, when I think of like gaming having an impact on me and what I enjoy and what I like, I think of Knights of the Republic 2, and it's been, when I try to think of modern games that have done that for me, they've kind of been very far and few between. But I do also think about games like, I recently, just a year ago, played a game like Code Vein. And Code Vein is a game that, a lot of people kind of looked past as being kind of anime Dark Souls. But I like anime and I like Dark Souls. But I just don't like Dark Souls itself as much as many people do. So it's like, it's my version of Dark Souls that I often like to play or prefer to play. And I don't think that's a problem. I think, I think there being different clones of different games is a good thing, because I think everyone has their own aesthetic tastes, gameplay tastes, and stuff like that. But when talking about Code Vein is a world that is also Code Vein is a world that's also a world of contention, where basically there's been an apocalypse and your character and many other characters have been turned into almost this vampiric creature, and you're trying to find out, what has occurred to bring this world into ruin, and why is it that you're able to basically absorb the blood and the memories of other people. And throughout the game, you meet several characters who, they interweave the mechanics of collecting powers with story, where when you collect these things called vestiges, these vestiges unlock memories into the backgrounds of the world. And so there is a motivation not just to only get more power so you can power through the game, but to also learn the story of what has occurred to the populace and the people. Because the more vestiges you collect, eventually I think it has like some sort of impact on how characters interact with you. And when you start getting these more significant vestiges, they have a very big impact on how the game ends, and they have implications as to why you might get a good ending or a bad ending or the true ending and stuff like that. And overall, when you consider the overall story of Code Vein, you start to recognize it is a story of these humans turned into these vampiric creatures who are fighting against these other monsters called the Lost. But it's a world of strife and struggle, because the game's underlying meaning curtails holding people's burdens. And what I mean by this is that in this world, I'm trying to be as spoilerish, anti-spoilerish as possible, but you find out that the world itself is being held together by someone. And that's when the overall theme to me had such an impact to how I often I think life is as well, where it can be very cruel and very tough, but the world is being held together by people who are trying to alleviate a lot of the burdens that people have to suffer from or survive through in order to see tomorrow. And it's not a perfect existence, and in fact it can be a very painful one for various people around the globe. But what really makes tomorrow worth it is the idea that somebody is holding the sky up over your head, even if it is at great consequence to their own self-preservation. And that's what I'm talking about when I think about like art having a message, and gaming being art and having a very big message for you to sort of absorb and take home. And that's why I tend to really enjoy the idea of themes or thematic narrative or characterization, because just the very idea of something having some relative significance to how one can philosophically view the world or see the consequences of action and perspective. I think whether you're reading a book or a comic book or watching an anime or watching a movie, I've always felt like fiction can have a very big impact on living a non-fiction fantasy lifestyle. It allows you to walk in the shoes of your favorite character to understand, the difficult situations life can throw at you and how your decisions how it can have very grave consequences. But writing like this and messaging like this depends on having the macro level scope understanding of, very specific questions and inquiries that hit the right beats and the right tone to feed the right message. So it's not something anyone can just do, but I think if you understand life and you understand people and you're very well educated, you can craft art like this that leaves something within you for a lifetime. That's why I really enjoy, for instance, playing games such as even Final Fantasy XIV, which I talk about a lot on this channel, on this podcast, because it's a game that overall you would think is just a run-and-mill tale about a hero being the chosen one, but it is very much a tale about community, collective, and understanding. No matter what or how powerful you are as an individual, you are still reliant on the collective whole of your friends and your fellow scions of the Seventh Dawn, and even just the small kindnesses of strangers in order to see the very end of an adventure and to defeat the big bad of whatever campaign or scenario or expansion that you're playing in the game. And so I think these things have these messages, these themes just are very important, because I think that the less we can move away from only finding value in stories that are just about, how many, I don't know. I'm big protagonist with spiky hair and giant sword. I cut down X amount of people and I'm great and I'm special. I think that, I think having brain dead media is fine once in a while, but I've never been someone who wants it to be a hallmark staple of the only thing people can absorb, because I do like media or mediums that can express some level of sort of like collective consciousness about it's not good enough to just feel that like you are either blessed for greatness or you're endowed with talent and blah blah blah. It's expressed that the character you play or the world you exist in is able to function, or you're able to triumph over its challenges because there is some level of unity or union, because we are humans, and as humans we are a social species. Even the idea of thinking you can live, for instance, in your own country and think you can exist on an island. I'm not going to say any names on what country I'm talking about, but this idea that you can just exist on your own island, and anything that occurs in any other vicinity that's outside your peripheral view is not your problem, is not enough. And I think storytelling will be a fantastic way to change hearts and minds, and can have a very gigantic impact on the world as a whole, in what we're willing to consider and achieve, and how we must change in order to cultivate a brighter future that hopefully is on the horizon, but we shall see. So yeah, that's kind of how I basically interact with my gaming, because in many ways I feel like I game more than I might watch movies. I did grow up reading manga and anime, but I feel like oftentimes the messages that had impacted me when I was younger from some of the media or the gaming that I had consumed wasn't always the most holistic messaging that was very healthy to development, because it was very easy for me to take with me this idea that things just work out because they're either meant to work out for you or they're not meant to work out for you. And so I had a very just world hypothesis from the media I'd consumed that kind of fed into this idea that, good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. And a lot of people have this framework because, the hard work that goes into achieving goals and dreams, or, having to have a consideration rather than ignorance, is something that other people are not often, it's not endorsed, or people don't understand how there's so many facets of so many things that you have in life that are because of other people behind the scenes doing something. And that's why when thinking about these games, either Nicely or Republic, or thinking about Final Fantasy, etc., I do want more conscious media that has messaging that entails, this idea of collective consciousness, inclusivity, representation, and a level of diverseness that shows that the whole is just as important as the sum of its parts, or the sum of its parts is just as important as the whole. Because from there we can observe anything in gaming or in our fantasies from a micro and macro level perspective, to understand that great things don't just happen because of special individuals who are imbued with powers and stuff like that. It can also be something that considers that even the smallest person has a gigantic impact on the conclusion of the story. That's why I have a very hard time sometimes playing games or interacting with media where there's just a chosen person who's just better than everyone, and everyone is kind of sitting on the bench. And I'm kind of looking at you, Dragon Ball Z, because I'm not to like roast Dragon Ball or anything like that, but I kind of stopped watching Dragon Ball Z after the Buu saga. I know it's still around even to this day, but I kind of got over just Goku and Vegeta just being sort of the head honchos. That isn't to say that there aren't characters who aren't involved, who don't participate in saving the planet, but when I think of every major situation, it always feels like if you're not a Super Saiyan, then you're just not as relevant. And it's unfortunate that I'm saying this now for such a show that I grew up and loved and adored, but I guess I'm just using it as an example, and I'm not trying to tear something someone loves apart. That I just want media or gaming or anything in general to kind of, again, have a more widespread message that takes into account that every character or every person you meet is their own main character, and they're always going to have some level of significance, and should have some level of significance on how the story cultivates or culminates. Because it's one thing just to be the person with the giant sword, it's another thing to be the person who builds the plane so that person with the giant sword can get from point A to point B. And I think that's just how I look at it. That's how I look at life imitating art, or art imitating life, from a philosophical point of view, from sociological point of view, from basically any social point of view. That I think there should always be a consideration, or some reflective message that encompasses just how important all of us can be, whether as characters or people, in either the story of the game we play or in the story of life. Because that's what's always inspired me to pursue what I've always desired or dream of, feeling as if I can have a positive impact. But it's not just because of myself, it's because I'm guaranteed to not have to do everything alone. And so that's why this is kind of my, I guess, podcast essay about more conscious storytelling, or how Again, I haven't figured out how I'm going to title this video, but it's definitely going to be something like uh, Gaming Imitates Life or Life Imitates Art or something like that. So I hope this has been an enjoyable topic of discussion today. Um, I'm sorry that this whole show or this whole episode is coming out as late as it is now. I've just been, again, I need intrinsic motivation if I'm going to release episodes like this, you understand? But yeah, again, thank you so much for taking your time out to listen to what I have to say. You all take care. Good night.